When I heard a yelp that sounded like a puppy's cry, my breath caught, because I knew it was not a stray dog in the forest. I was out alone, a man near 60, an old hunter who had left the gun at home. I took a small pail for berries and my old knife, more out of habit than need. The morning was quiet, soft with mist. I knew these trees. I grew up with them. I thought I knew their voices. But that cry, thin, cracked, and bright with fear, cut through me like a wire pulled tight. I stood still. The wind moved past my ears. The cry came again, shorter this time, like someone's hand had clamped over a mouth. My legs moved before my mind did. I stepped off the path into a tangle of ferns and young pines. The ground was damp and springy. I kept my shoulders low, the way I used to when tracking. Every few steps I listened. The forest held its breath with me. I found the place by accident or by pull, I still do not know. A break in the brush, a small hollow under rowan and hazel. At first I saw nothing but leaves. Then the leaves shook. 2 yellow eyes blinked up at me from a face too narrow, too fine-boned to be a dog. A wolf pup, small. He was not bigger than the pail in my hand. He trembled all over like a bird in a fist. His paws were splayed, his belly was thin, and his coat still had that soft down that looks more like smoke than fur. He made no sound now. He only opened and closed his mouth, as if calling without a voice. I whispered, without meaning to, "Where is your mother?" He looked past me, not at me, and I felt a cold ring close around my chest. Something else was in the air. The ground seemed to tilt. The silence grew heavy, as if it had weight. My hand found the knife on my belt, though I did not remember reaching for it. The smell reached me first, damp and sour, like old meat left too long in a shed. Branches scraped in the thicket behind the pup. The leaves rose and fell with a slow push, a slow breath that was not the wind. I knew that sound the way you know your own name. A bear, not a fat summer ghost that wanders off when it sees you. This was a lone one, a drifter, a hunger that walks. The brush opened as if torn by a dark hand. He stepped out, big as a door, fur matted and patchy on the shoulders, old scars like pale ropes across his chest. His head swung, and his lips peeled back just enough to show the yellow of his teeth. His eyes were wrong, too small, too hot. They moved past me without interest, as if I were a stump, and fixed on the hollow where the pup lay. I did not breathe. The world narrowed to fur, breath, and the soft rattle of leaves. The pup made a sound then, a tiny thing, no louder than a chime under a coat, but it was full of panic that had nowhere to go. My heart stopped. He was too small to survive. I took a step without thinking. The bear's head snapped toward me. For a heartbeat, we looked into each other like two men across a table. I felt the weight of him, the hunger, the ache of a body that had not slept well in a long time. He did not want me. I was not easy food. He wanted the small thing that would not fight back. He moved forward in that slow way bears have when they know there is no rush. He placed each paw as if testing the ground for the shape of his own anger. The pup tried to stand and slid back into the leaves, claws scraping at soil that gave no hold. I wanted to shout, to throw my pail, to be loud and bright and wrong in the way that sometimes saves you. But my mouth would not open. My old blood knew a rule older than the knife on my belt. Do not draw the storm to yourself. The bear stopped one body length from the hollow. He lifted his head and drew in the pup's scent as if it were smoke from a hot pan. His breath came out in a thick snort. Leaves trembled. The pup flattened to the earth, legs open, abdomen pressed down as if he could bury himself in a skin of dirt. "Go," I whispered to the pup. "Go, little one." The bear lowered his head. He did not lunge. He did not roar. He laid his paw on the edge of the hollow with a slow, careful press, the way a man might test a step on ice. The pup did the smallest, strangest thing, a tiny whine, the sound a child makes in sleep when it dreams of falling. It broke me. I felt heat behind my eyes. I hated the bear then, and I pitied him in the same breath. Fear and mercy rose together and choked me. I could see it all, clear and cruel. The paw would slide, the claws would hook. A jerk, a shake, and silence would come back to the trees. I thought, this is the end. I thought, this is how the forest stays fed. I thought, nothing can stop this. I thought it, with the heavy calm of a man who has seen winter take lambs and knows that arguing with cold is a waste of life. I told myself to look away, but I did not look away. I could not. My whole body hurt with the effort of staying still. The bear shifted his weight. The earth under his paw sank, and the pup's belly rose as if the ground itself were breathing for him. The bear's lips twitched, not a snarl, something like a grimace, as if even his teeth knew they were about to be used for a thing they did not love. The forest offered nothing, no wing beat, no twig snap. Even the gnats seemed to hang in the air as if nailed there. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a slow drum with no rhythm, like the last steps of a man at the end of a long road. I told myself, move now, throw the pail, shout, be foolish, break the spell, but old habits held me. Do not run, do not climb, do not turn your back. Inside that silence I felt very small, the way you feel small under a high ceiling in a dark church. The bear's paw slid forward another inch. The claws curled. The pup gave one last, thin cry that did not even rise to the air. It fell at my feet like a dropped needle. The bear's shoulders lifted. His body swayed with the lift. I saw it, the motion in his spine before he would strike. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the forest had closed its hand. I thought the little life in the leaves would go out, and the trees would go on, as if nothing had happened. I was wrong. The paw came down like a falling log and pinned the pup to the leaves. Not a blow. Worse, a slow press that said the bear was in no hurry. I heard the breath pop out of the pup, as if someone had stepped on a bellows. His legs scrabbled in the dirt, pushing at nothing. The claws curved in, careful as hooks, and I felt the ground leave my feet, though I had not moved. I have seen many things in the forest, but a lone bear in this shape is the most dangerous thing we have. A drifter, a sleeper woken wrong, a body that burns its own fat and then its own reason. He has no herd, no mate, no season. He is just hunger attached to muscle. You cannot bargain with it. Stones do not ask you to plead. Fire does not listen. A bear like this is the same. My hands were empty, except for the useless knife and a pail that would only clang once before the world went dark. He tightened the paw. The pup stretched longer, ribs like sticks under a wet shirt. The bear's head dipped, and I saw the old scars again, pale seams left by winters that had not killed him. He had learned to take what could be taken. He would take this. The pup found a corner of air and dragged a sound through it, thin and raw, as if his throat were lined with thorns. It drilled into me, not my ears, but the soft part behind them where fear lives. In his cry there was such a plea that I closed my eyes. I couldn't bear it. I saw that plea anyway. It had the shape of a small chest trying to rise under a heavy hand. It had the color of milk spilled on dirt. I opened my eyes because the bear moved again. His jaws parted just enough to show the wet dark behind his teeth. The breath that came out was hot and bitter, the stink of old berries and old blood. He was going to end it, and the forest would swallow the echo before it reached the path. And then the air changed. I felt it more than I heard it at first, a vibration under the skin, like the rumble before a storm. The pup gave another cry, higher, sharper. A knife pulled against a wire. It leapt out of the hollow and went running through the trees like a thrown stone, looking for a bell. The answer came from far off, a single long note that rose and then broke apart into threads of iron. A wolf's call, not close, not one, It rolled through the forest in a slow wave and lifted the hairs on my arms. Another voice joined, then another, some deeper, some thin as reeds. The sound braided itself until the trees carried it in their trunks. The bear's ears twitched. He did not like it. I have heard wolves at night far away, a song that makes you feel less alone and more alone at the same time. This was different. This was not singing. This was a string pulled tight from one heart to many and plucked hard. The pup answered with a broken squeal that I felt in my teeth. The bear lifted his head and turned it toward the sound, then back to the pup, then toward the sound again. His paw stayed where it was. I could see his thoughts with a terrible clarity. This was small and simple. That was large and complicated. He wanted the small, but the large was coming. The howls moved. You can tell when a sound travels. The way water sounds different on stones than on mud. They were not circling, not yet. They were closing the distance as if a net were being pulled through the trees. They kept a rhythm, not fast, not slow, each voice finding a place in the rope they were throwing through the forest. I could breathe again, though the air felt thin. The pup's eyes rolled toward the direction of the calls and then back at the bear's paw, as if he could be in two places with his hope. I don't know how he lived under that weight, but he did, small lungs ticking in a body pinned to the earth. The bear made a sound then, a low cough that had no sickness in it, only warning. He rocked his weight forward and back, testing the ground the way a man tests a door before he breaks it. The howls changed key. They flattened into something colder, fewer voices now but closer, like footsteps on boards you know well. I tried to make myself taller without standing up. It is a foolish thing, human pride, to want to be counted when you are useless. I thought of firing a shot into the dirt, but there was no gun. I thought of throwing the pail again, but what would that do? I thought of stepping between the paw and the pup, but my body would not obey that thought, and I do not blame it. You can love something and still not put your body over it when iron is falling. The first shadow moved between trunks to my left, quick, gray, and gone. Then another, lower, heavier. I did not see faces, only legs like smoke and the brush curling after them. The bear saw them too. He pulled the paw back half an inch and then pressed it again, as if answering a question he had not been asked. The voices cut off. The silence that followed was thick as sap. I knew then they were near enough to be quiet. The quiet was the shape of their plan. My mouth went dry. The pup whimpered, a tiny, stubborn sound, the thread that had called all this into being and still, somehow, held. I thought the next moment would be blood and movement. I thought the wolves would come as one body with many teeth, the way stories say they do, all fury and dust, and the forest would shake with it. I thought the bear would rear up, and there would be a clash you could feel in your bones, and then there would be nothing left but leaves and steam. I was sure of it. I told myself, the pack will attack, and it will be a fight to the finish. I braced for it, jaw set, hands tight, eyes wide, so I wouldn't miss how the world turns when it turns on teeth. But the wolves did not come the way I expected. They came out of the trees the way dusk does, quiet, steady, one shape becoming two, two becoming many. A gray form slid from the shade and stopped, weight low, ears forward. Another trotted in a half circle and stood to my right. Then a third, darker, appeared between spruce trunks as if the forest itself exhaled him. I counted without numbers. They placed themselves the way stones place a river, not touching, each altering the current of the others. The bear swung his head and let out a deep, grinding growl that I felt in the handle of my knife. The pup was still under that heavy paw, ribs fluttering. The bear shifted, pinning him with more certainty, and bared his teeth, not in show, more like a man rolling up his sleeves. The wolves did not flinch. They drifted wider, a slow spill of gray and smoke, and the circle took shape before I realized I was inside it too, just a stump they ignored. No one rushed, no one lunged. I waited for the famous chaos, the white-hot moment when fur flies and the world breaks into motion. It didn't come. What came was stillness with a pulse. Each wolf had a job I could not name. They faced in, then out, trading glances as quick as sparks. One sniffed the wind and moved 3 paces left. Another sat, rose again, and took 2 soft steps forward, so light I could not hear them at my own feet. The bear tested their nerves. He drove a short, hoarse roar into the circle and snapped at the nearest wolf, a gray with a thin notch in one ear. The gray didn't retreat. He turned his body sideways, presenting a narrow profile, and held. The bear's jaws closed on air. The paw never left the pup. The bear's eyes were bright with the ugly light I had seen before, hot and close and tired of hunger. He had chosen his meal. He would not drop it. Why don't they attack? The question beat in my head with my pulse. The pack had numbers. They had teeth. They had the boiling song of a few minutes ago. But they moved with a care that looked, at first, like fear. They made space for his weight. They matched his sway with theirs. They tracked the paw that held the small life, and whenever the paw shifted, some invisible thread tugged them all an inch in answer. They are afraid, I told myself. Of course they are. A lone bear is a threshing machine with a mind. He breaks what he wants and keeps what breaks. Wolves are quick, but a paw like that can end a line in a breath. My throat dried. The circle felt thin. Wind pushed a curtain of leaves and let it fall again. The world kept waiting. A large wolf eased from the rear, not the biggest in body, but the one the others made room for, without looking. His coat was winter light over the ribs, steel down the spine, and his eyes had a patient weight in them. He stood with his legs square and his head low, and when he lifted his nose, the circle tightened by a hair's breadth. Near him, a female with a pale muzzle didn't look at him at all. She looked at the pup, and then at the bear's paw, and then at the dark line of the bear's mouth. She licked the air once, twice, tasting it the way a mother tastes a fever. The bear rumbled, a rolling mortar in a deep chest, and showed the curve of his claws. He threw his free paw at the air to his left. 2 wolves melted backward, then returned to the same spot as if drawn on strings. The bear blew hot breath through his lip and snot spat to the leaves. The wolves did not answer with sound. Their silence was a made thing, like a rope someone braids without talking. I wanted noise. I wanted the snap and crisis that would break this open. Instead, there was calculation, a chessboard I didn't know how to read. A young wolf, legs still a little too long for his body, inched too far forward. The female with the pale muzzle flashed teeth at him, silent, quick, a razor held up for a second, and he sank back onto his haunches, ashamed, quivering with the want to fly. It looked like cowardice, until it didn't. I saw the pattern then, the way their bodies wrote it. They weren't frozen, they were measuring. Someone kept the wind. Someone guarded the bear's blind side. Someone watched me as if I were a slow-moving tree with a secret. The large male lifted a paw and set it down again, hardly a movement. 3 wolves traded places like dancers who've practiced 1,000 times in the dark. The bear did not like the circle. He hunched his shoulders and tried to drive forward. The ring flexed and held, never closing, never breaking. 2 wolves drifted to his rear quarter and stood still, not tempting, not taunting, just standing where his eyes could not rest in both places at once. His head swung to watch them, and for the first time his paw eased, not much, but enough that the pup drew in breath with a shiver you could see. I told myself a hard thing. I told myself I was about to watch them fail. I told myself they were only going to witness it the way we do sometimes, powerless and present while fate lowers its hand. I decided they would stand there and let the bear tear their little one apart because wisdom had told them the cost of trying. I decided this because it was easier to think they were careful than to hope they were brave. I decided it and I hated myself for deciding it. I figured they were just going to watch while the bear tore their pup apart. Then the large male stepped, not forward, not back, but sideways, placing his body between the bear's face and a gap in the ring. The female's eyes met his for less than a blink. In that flicker, I saw something I did not expect to find in a predator's gaze. It was not fear. It was resolve, deep and held, like a promise someone makes to the dead and intends to keep. But in their eyes, there was not fear. There was resolve. The ring tightened one notch. A gray tail lifted and fell. Breath moved through the pack like a hand. The bear lowered his head to strike. The wolves did something then that made no sound I can write and no sense I had words for. Whatever it was, it began the thing I still cannot explain. The bear struck first, a short, savage lunge that swallowed the space between him and the nearest gray. The wolf slipped sideways with a dry skid of leaves, body folding and opening like a hinge, and the bear's swipe carved nothing but air. The sound that came out of the bear's chest was not a roar so much as a torn drum, a rip that shook the brush. He wheeled, shoulders bunching, and snapped again. The wolf was already gone, the place he'd been filling with nothing but shivering ferns. A young wolf, narrow-chested, legs a size too big, couldn't stand the tension and gathered himself to leap. I saw the coil, the bright mistake of it. Before he left the ground, an older gray shouldered him hard, not biting, not cruel, just an iron nudge that said, "Not yet." The youngster's paws thumped back into the leaves. He shook with heat, humiliated and alive. The correction took one heartbeat and saved 10. They moved like thinkers, not berserkers, like men who have done a job together for many winters and know each other's breath. Every placement of a paw seemed chosen. Every pause wasn't a freeze, but a count. I felt my old hunter's brain trying to map it and failing. This was not the chaos I'd been bracing for. This was shape, a plan without words. They began to work the bear's mind. One wolf trotted left and raised a long, low note that crept under the skin, just one line of sound that bent and held. Another ghosted to the bear's right, darted in with a snap at an ankle, and was gone before the claws kissed dirt. The bear spun, and the circle shifted with him, never closing, never breaking, the ring elastic as breath. The pup was still trapped under that heavy paw, chest fluttering like a moth under glass. The bear stood over him, huffing, jaws wet, eyes burning with that tight, angry light. He wanted the small end to this problem. The wolves wanted him to want anything else. A gray planted himself in the bear's vision and held, not taunting, just being there with a steadiness that grated. Another gray pebbled the ground with quick steps at the bear's rear quarter, drawing that massive head into a swing that left a blind edge at the front. The she-wolf with the pale muzzle never stopped counting the pup's breaths. When the bear shifted, she shifted. When the pup's ribs stuttered, her ears cut the air. The bear lunged again, more anger than aim, and the wolves flowed apart and closed again. The young wolf tried to surge once more. This time the big male flicked him a glance, so stern and spare it stopped him colder than a bite. Leadership, clean as a struck nail. They started to layer the noise. The first voice held its low line, while a second answered with a higher thread that wavered and fell. It wasn't the chorus from before. It was a lure, a dissonance that made the bear's ears work too hard. He swung toward the sound, and in that lean, the paw over the pup loosened for a breath's width. I saw the pup's ribs lift, one thin sip of air. Hope is a dangerous thing to feel in a forest like this. It makes you move when you should not. The flanker struck, teeth at tendon, not holding, not brave to the point of stupid, just a hit and gone. The bear flinched, weight shifting to follow the pain. The paw that pinned the pup slid off him and planted beside his ribcage, claws furrowing the soil like plow tines. The pup wrenched his body sideways and collapsed 2 handspans away, dazed, dragging one leg. He was free, and not free at all. The bear slapped the ground where the pup had been, a blow that would have ended a small life if it had landed. Dirt jumped. He threw his paw back over the pup like a door slamming, only this time the weight wasn't perfect. The claws arched over the pup's flank, touching fur without crushing bone, a shelter and a trap in the same motion. I thought he would crush the little one now. The she-wolf saw the same danger I did and sang. The sound she made wasn't a howl for distance. It was close and raw, a wire pulled out of a throat. The she-wolf howled like a human screaming in pain. It cut straight through the bear's focus. He lifted his head, startled by the shape of it, like hearing your name in a stranger's mouth. The big male used that blink. He prowled 2 steps to a line that put him almost nose to nose with the bear, and simply stood there, chest square, tail level, eyes hard, with a patience that read like a threat. To the side, another gray stitched in and out, a needle teasing cloth, never pulling a stitch tight, just making the fabric of the bear's attention thin and fray. I kept waiting for the charge that would cost them bodies. It didn't come. What came was pressure, layered and relentless. A brush of teeth at the hock, a feint at the shoulder, a breathy growl from the rear that made the bear want to turn, and, when he did, left him facing nothing. His breathing went choppy. He wanted to end many problems at once and could not choose which. The pup tried to belly crawl out from under that arched paw and met a wall of fur. He froze, eyes wide and filmed with panic. The she-wolf's voice lifted again, higher now, keening toward a pitch that made my molars ache. It wasn't only warning. It was grief held in the mouth so it would not spill. I felt it in my chest, like a hand squeezing. The pack answered with silence, as if her cry was enough sound for all of them. The bear slammed his free paw at the big male's face. The male didn't give him the target. He pivoted, weight low, and the blow ripped nothing but air and leaves. The flanker nicked the bear's ankle again and vanished under a spray of dirt. The bear swayed, confused by his own momentum. His paw eased on the pup. Another thin breath won. I could not believe what I was seeing. They were not driven by heat. They were cooling the fire, second by second, shaping it, drawing it down, forcing it to choose and choose again until it chose wrong. Any fool can rush, only a family can think under teeth. The she-wolf's cry fell to a broken sob and then rose once more, the sound thinning until it was almost a whistle and then deepening into a rough, chesty moan. It filled the clearing with a feeling I cannot name. I saw the bear's ears flick back against his skull. He hated that sound. He did not fear it, but he hated it. The paw lifted, hovering, the claws curled to strike or shield. I could not tell which. The pup tucked his nose under his chest, making himself as small as a heartbeat. My own breath stalled. The bear's head dipped, and I saw the muscles bunch along his neck, the promise of the blow just beginning. I thought the next instant would be the end for the little one. I thought the forest would clap its hands and be done. I was braced for it, so braced I shook. And in that braced, shaking second, the wolves did the one thing I did not expect at all. They didn't meet him head-on. They made him move. The big male eased out of the bear's line and began a slow, deliberate circle, not closing distance, just bending it. He kept his head low and his tail level, never offering a clean target, and the bear's gaze tracked him like a bead on a string. While those small eyes followed the circle, 2 others slid into the space the attention left behind. One showed a shoulder and then vanished. Another flashed teeth at the hawk and was already smoke by the time the paw came down. The bear hated to turn, and they made him turn anyway. Every pivot cost him. He'd swing his head, drag his weight, and find nothing there, only breath, only the ghost of what had teased him. Then the tease would come from the other side. It wasn't bravery, it was work. They were grinding him down one heartbeat at a time. The pup stayed under that arched paw, sucking air in thin threads. The she-wolf with the pale muzzle kept her eyes on him and on the bear's wrist, reading the pressure the way a medic reads a pulse. When the paw pressed, she froze the pack with stillness. When it eased, she let the river flow again with a small shift of her shoulder. If she had spoken, the words could not have been clearer. The circle breathed. The big male's round drew the bear's mind like a slow turn of a key. The others wrote distractions along the edges, a cough from the brush where no wolf stood, the whisper of paws in leaves, a quick, flat growl that came and went like a match struck and blown out. It wasn't noise to be loud, it was noise to tangle, to make his thoughts stumble. He lunged at emptiness and had to catch his own weight. He swiped at a phantom and found bark. He snapped at the shadow of a tail and closed his jaws on air. Sweat darkened his neck. Foam bubbled at the corners of his mouth. Each time he planted that paw back over the pup, it came down a fraction less certain, a fraction more out of breath. The young wolf tried again, hopeful, boiling. He gathered to leap, and the big male cut him short with a single glance, a flat command that was more spine than sound. The youngster bit down on his own need and channeled it into motion, carving a careful half-moon that tugged at the bear's hindquarters without ever crossing into the kill zone of those claws. I understood it then, with a clarity that made my skin prickle. This was not chaos. This was a plan, old as hunger, tuned by winters and scars. They were building fatigue the way masons build a wall, one stone at a time, each placed where it would carry weight. I had mistaken silence for fear and patience for doubt. I had been wrong, but in their movement there was the same wisdom as in military cunning. The big male widened his circle until it brushed the edges of sight. The bear couldn't stand it. He lurched after him, dragging the terrible bulk forward. In that drag, the paw over the pup lifted a breath higher than before. The she-wolf's ears pricked. She did not move. The pup's ribs fluttered. He lived. He waited. Two wolves traded places so smoothly it looked like one body flowing through itself. One took the front, soaking the bear's stare with a flat, unblinking gaze. The other loomed at the rear, then vanished and reappeared at an angle that made the bear's shoulders twist. Twisting is costly. You can feel it in your own back if you try it long enough. The bear began to pant in short bursts that smelled like rot and berries. His growls broke off mid-voice and fell into grunts. Anger rose in him. It made his movements bigger and worse. He threw a paw where a nip had been a heartbeat earlier and ripped the ground, sending dirt over the pup's flank. The pup flinched and went still. The paw hovered high. I thought the bear would slam it down and end the small life under it just to end one problem. He didn't. He couldn't. Not cleanly. Not with the big male turning his head, the flankers needling the ankles, the she-wolf's voice ready to slice his focus the moment it sharpened. He was trying to solve too much at once. You could see it in the way his ears flicked, the way his eyes skittered from threat to threat and never settled long enough to choose. Minutes stretched thin. Each pass took a toll. His shoulders lost some spring. His swipes came late. The foam at his mouth thickened to strings. He began to pause between lunges, as if listening to his own heart. The wolves filled those pauses with small cuts of attention. Stand, shift, breathe. Those were their tools. I had thought teeth were the only tools they had. The big male broke his circle and crossed the bear's nose at a measured distance, a man walking past a chained dog he does not intend to run from. The bear followed, drawn, and the ring behind him closed half a pace. Not enough to trap, enough to shape. The space where the paw could fall cleanly grew smaller, tighter. The she-wolf stood like a hinge on which the whole door turned. I waited for the breakdown, For one wolf to misread the line, for one swipe to land, for the small order they had made to dissolve into the kind of mess that ends with blood and a story no one tells because it hurts to remember. But they kept the count. They held the breath. They played their parts. My legs had gone numb. I realized my hands ached from clenching the useless knife. I wanted so badly to help that it felt like shame. Instead, I watched. And in watching, I learned. Strategy can look like mercy from far away and like cruelty from up close. It is neither. It is the bridge that carries love through danger. The bear huffed, then coughed, then huffed again. He shook his head, slinging spit. He planted his free paw wide to steady himself and almost stumbled. His hips began to show their math. Heavy, slow, late. He was losing inches. He didn't know he was losing. And still the pup lay pinned in the shadow of that one lifted threat. I told myself the ugliest thought of the day. I told myself they would tire and abandon the pup. I told myself the pattern would shred, the circle would fray, and the little one would be left to fate because even love has limits when muscle runs out. I almost believed it. I almost believed they were done. Then the big male did something he had not done once since he arrived. He stopped. He stood square. He raised his head and let out a sound so low I felt it before I heard it. The ring changed shape in a breath, opening a narrow lane where there had been none. The she-wolf flicked an ear and shifted a single paw. A risk took form in the air like a drawn bow. They had been saving a move. And I, fool that I am, had not seen the space where it would fit until it was already opening. If your heart just skipped a beat, you understand. Subscribe to the channel. The move they'd been holding broke like a quiet wave. A gray peeled from the ring and came in close, closer than any of them had dared. He didn't come screaming. He flowed, silent and low, like smoke hugging the ground. And then he was there, teeth at tendon, risking the only coin the forest respects, his own body. The bear reacted on instinct. His jaw snapped, his shoulders surged, and in that hot, panicked turn, he did the thing the wolves had been asking him to do without asking. He let go of the pup. The heavy paw lifted and chopped at the gray that had cut in. The gray took the hit in sparks of dirt and pain and twisted free with a torn yelp that shocked the stillness like a struck wire. He lived, but the cost was clear in the way he limped, in the wet flicker along his coat. The bear's other paw scythed the air and found only leaves. The small body under him was no longer under him. The pup tried to stand and folded. He didn't cry anymore. He crawled, belly, elbows, claws, an inch, then another, toward a knot of hazel at the edge of the hollow. He moved like a broken clock, jerking and pausing, every breath a debt. I saw his eyes, clouded, wild, still searching for a mother he could not see. The she-wolf with the pale muzzle exploded from her stillness. She didn't look at the bear. She didn't look at the ring. She aimed at the only thing that mattered and drove straight past the reach of those claws with a courage that made my throat burn. She put her muzzle under the pup's ribs and lifted, gently, impossibly gently, then pushed him, inch by inch, with the side of her face. He slid on his chest, legs useless, and she nudged him again, steering him toward the hazel where the earth rose and roots made a small shelter. The bear saw movement and struck for it, but the big male blocked with a square body and a dead calm that turned the blow into a bad angle. The flanker hit the ankle again, buying half a second that felt like an hour. Another gray threw a feint at the shoulder and took a cuff that sent him spinning, then popped back into place as if attached to the very idea of here. The she-wolf pushed the pup into the shadow of the brush and planted herself between him and the bear, chest forward, head low, a wall made of breath and bone. She did not snarl. She simply stood, and in her eyes there was a fire I know from human faces. When a mother steps in front of a car, she cannot stop and tries anyway. I saw gratitude there too, so plain it hurt, as if she already thanked the pack for the seconds they were buying and thanked the world for granting them at all. She looked at the pup and then at the big male, and in that small look, I felt something break open in me. It was the kind of thanks that feels like a prayer. I saw a mother's gratitude burning in her eyes. The pup's sides fluttered. He made a small sound, not fear now, but effort, a grunt of life refusing to let go. He tried to tuck his nose deeper into the dark between roots. The hazel leaves shivered over him like a hand pulling a blanket. The bear roared, full voice this time, a blast that punched the leaves flat. Anger had eaten his patience. He hammered at the wolves who had taken his certainty, and each swing came a little late, a little wild. The big male took a rake along his shoulder and bled without stepping back. The risk-taker who had started it limped to the ring, found his place by grit alone, and held. The circle didn't praise him. It simply made room and went on working, as if pain were a fact and love were a job. I felt my knees shake. My knife was still in my hand, ridiculous and hot. My mouth kept forming words that never left it. Thank you, I thought, to an animal that would never hear me speak. Thank you for not letting go when it would have been easier to let go. The she-wolf glanced at me. It could have been nothing, a flicker of eyes while counting threats, but I took it like a message I had no right to receive. You see this, don't you? Her look seemed to say. You see what we are, not the story you brought with you. I nodded like a fool. I think I did it out loud. I thought that now, with the pup tucked into his small fortress, the wolves would melt away. I thought they had won the only prize that mattered and would trade the rest for it, take their small life and leave the larger one behind to cool. I thought the forest would take a long breath and let them go. I told myself, now that the little one is safe, it will end. I was wrong. The pack did not retreat. They did not loosen. They did not cash out their winnings and run. They squared up against the rage they had woken and prepared to pay for what they had saved. The pack did not leave. They stood against the monster. The big male stepped forward one pace, the kind of step that changes weather. He did not bare his teeth. He did not posture. He existed in a way that filled the bear's eyes, and the circle's pulse matched his. A gray at the rear slid closer to the hazel and stood guard over the small, battered breath inside. The young wolf, chest heaving, held his line with a new stillness. The fever of leaping burned down to a hard blue coal. The bear tried to force the lane to the hazel and found bodies where space had been. He tried to bait a rush and met patience. He feinted. They did not bite. He committed. They bled him with seconds. Each failure clawed at him. Each turn took a toll. He shook his head like a bull tormented by gnats and by something he could not name. A net with no strands. A fight with no single throat to close teeth around. The she-wolf did not sing now. She breathed. She watched. She kept the count on a life tucked in leaves, and every time the bear's eyes flicked that way, she shifted an inch and erased the path. I realized my breath had fallen into their rhythm. In, hold, out, step, wait, push. It was like being taught a language without words. It was like being invited into a prayer that no one says aloud. A breeze moved through the spruce tops and reached us late, as if the world had been holding its own breath and finally let some of it go. Needles hissed. Shadows changed shape. The bear's next lunge came slow. He was strong, but he was not endless. The wolves had been right to choose time as their weapon. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded in my neck. I knew then that what I was seeing was not luck and not accident. It was a family doing math with courage and sharing the cost. It was strategy written in fur and breath. It was love that had learned how to fight. And yet the bear was still there, still terrible, still close enough that one good strike could ruin all of it. The pup shivered once in the hazel and went still again. The big male shifted his weight to the front of his paws, almost daring the blow that would come. We were not at the end. We were at the hinge. I could feel the door of it in my bones. The pack had taken the child from under the hammer, but the hammer had not fallen. Not yet. I set my teeth and tried not to pray. I am not a praying man, but I wanted, more than I have wanted anything, to see wisdom finish what it had started. He tried to force the hazel thicket with sound first. The roar he threw at us was full-bodied, a furnace blast that flattened leaves and made the pup's shelter tremble. He followed it with a lunge, but 3 wolves slid as one into the lane and stopped him cold. They didn't meet the paw with teeth. They met it with space, space that moved, space that denied him angles. He swiped, and they weren't there. He stepped, and the ground he wanted was already occupied by a low, steady body and an unblinking stare. He roared again, desperate now, the voice of muscle trying to scare time into reversing. No one flinched. The she-wolf held her post in front of the hazel, as if rooted, ribs lifting calm and even. The big male stood a half-pace forward, the axis on which the rest of them turned. When he shifted his weight, the ring matched him, a ripple through a single hide stretched over many bones. They moved like one animal, like an army that has trained on the same field every winter of its life. The bear realized the old trick, shock and rush, wouldn't buy him anything here. He tried to draw them out with a feint toward the flank. A gray mirrored him and then yielded exactly 2 steps, no more, so measured it felt like counting. Another wolf ghosted behind the bear's trailing hip and held, forcing the great head to choose, the front, where the path to the pup was guarded, or the rear, where a threat could bloom. He couldn't watch both, not properly. He chose neither well. His rage burned hotter as his strength thinned. His swings widened, his breath tore itself ragged, and the foam at his lips stretched in ropes that snapped and fell. He tried to bully the ring into breaking, to find the link that would fail. Every time he committed, a body filled the space he needed, and when he turned to punish that body, it wasn't there. It was like fighting smoke that knew geometry. The big male took a step I felt in my spine. It was not large, it was decisive. The ring followed, shrinking the map of possibility. The bear planted both forepaws and huffed, baffled that the world did not cower. He looked at the hazel. He looked at the she-wolf. He looked at the big male. In those quick, angry glances, I saw a dawning he hated. This would cost more than the meat was worth. He tried one last drive, a brutal shove meant to break lines and bones together. The wolves didn't hold their ground, they moved it. The front softened just enough to bend his rush sideways, and the flank firmed enough to catch his weight and bounce it back. He stumbled not far, just enough to feel his own mass betray him. That's when his eyes changed, the hot light in them cooled by a degree into calculation. He saw finally the arithmetic they had been forcing on him since the first circle formed. He backed a step. The forest took that step like a gift. The ring shifted with him, not pressing, not attacking, but making sure the lane behind him stayed the largest thing in his mind. He growled, a low, ugly sound that said he still could if he must, but his paws placed themselves in retreat, even while his mouth argued. The big male watched him go with a stillness that radiated consequence. Any lunge toward the hazel and the ring would harden. Any turn toward open ground and the ring would make room. The bear gave ground again. He swiveled to keep the wolves in front of him, not daring to show his back fully. His ears flattened, his head hung lower. Power left him not in a rush, but as if poured out of him in a slow spill he could not plug. He huffed once more, a last bluff, then turned enough to make the choice real. He was leaving. They did not celebrate. They escorted. 2 wolves shaped the space at his quarters, never so close as to invite a whirlwind, never so far as to give him comfort. The big male paced him, diagonal, a silent sentence that read, "This way." The she-wolf did not move from the hazel. Her body remained the door over the little life she had saved. The young wolf, chest still heaving, held the rear of the ring like a soldier who has finally learned where to stand. Step by grudging step, the bear faded into trees that seemed to swallow his outline and give him back as shadow. The wolves kept the distance exact. When he paused, they paused. When he turned his head to measure the lane back to the pup, eyes hot with the old want, the big male shifted, and that lane vanished. Twice he twitched as if to test them. Twice they answered without sound, and whatever he saw in that silence made him settle. He went. He slipped into undergrowth, a dark mass among darker masses, and then there was only the whisper of branches setting themselves upright. A minute passed, or an hour. Time had become a soft thing that tore if you pulled it. The ring eased but did not dissolve. The big male held his square. The she-wolf breathed. Behind her, the hazel leaves trembled on a breath that was not wind. My knees gave. I didn't notice until I felt wet moss under my palms. Tears came before I knew they were mine. They weren't fear. They were something heavier and cleaner, the kind of crying that comes when you are allowed to see a truth and can't carry it without spilling. I had not been spared. I had been taught. I wept for the wisdom and the force of a family that chose craft over fury and paid with skin and breath to put a small life back into the world. I wiped my face on my sleeve and laughed once without humor at the knife in my hand. It had never been more useless. All that time I had wanted to act, to shout, to throw myself into the space where they were doing math with courage. The only right act had been to witness and to learn. I felt small and right-sized at the same time, humbled to bone. I thought that was the end of it, I said, maybe aloud, maybe to the trees. The bear was gone. The pup was alive under leaves. The pack had held. What else could there be? But then I saw something that shook me more than anything. The forest exhaled. The last tremor of branches settled where the bear had gone, and all that remained was the soft sound of breath, many breaths, finding their own rhythm again. The ring loosened but did not vanish. Space opened like a hand unclenching. The she-wolf turned at last, not fast, not careless, as if the act of turning itself needed permission from something larger than fear. She stepped to the hazel thicket and lowered her head. Leaves stirred with a fragile life beneath. The pup lay there on his side, legs drawn tight, eyes half closed and glassy, chest working in thin, thread-pulled motions. He shivered the way a wire shivers when you pluck it. She touched him with her nose, first at the ribs, then at the crown of his head, then along the flank where the bear's weight had bruised the breath out of him. Her tongue came out, and, with small, precise licks, she cleaned the dirt and spit from his fur, the way a mother, any mother, cleans a child who has been pulled from under a wheel. The pup answered with a sound so small I almost missed it, a breathy that had no voice in it, only relief that hurt. He tried to tuck his paws under him and failed. The she-wolf nosed his shoulder and gave him a little push, not enough to move him far, just enough to remind his body it had a shape and a direction, and was still his. He trembled harder, then stilled, then trembled again. Alive, hurting, here. The big male approached without hurry. The others made space without looking. He was not larger now. He was simply the center of a thing that had always had him at its heart. He came to the edge of the hazel and stood over the pup, and for a moment he did nothing. He listened. He watched. He took in the small body that had been under a paw and was now under leaves. Then he bent and laid his muzzle gently across the pup's shoulders, a weight like a hand, not pressing, just resting there as if to say, "You are counted, you are kept, You are ours. It was not a kiss. It was not a lick. It was a blessing, if wolves have such a thing, and if they don't, then I witnessed the first. The pup's eyes slipped closed, not from fainting, but from a soft surrender to safety, the kind that stops the shaking long enough to let life catch up. One by one, the pack drew in. They did not pile. They gathered, arranging themselves in a loose crescent that curved around the hazel the way arms curve around a sleeping child. A young wolf crept close and lay with his body touching the bushes, a warm wall to hold the small breath inside. Another lay down opposite him, mirroring the shape, and the space between them became a small room. A gray stood at the opening of that room, not guarding with bared teeth, but with presence, a doorman at a holy place. The she-wolf resumed her careful work. She licked the pup's ear, then the corners of his eyes, then the scar where the claw had skimmed fur without finding flesh. The big male lifted his head and watched the tree line where the bear had gone. His breath was steady now, deep and slow. He checked the world for threats and then checked it again, a sentry who will not allow the memory of danger to become danger again. A soft sound passed through the pack. It was not a howl. It wasn't even a whine. It was the kind of low, thrumming note you feel in your ribs more than you hear. A humming that seemed to say, "Here, here, here." It threaded through them like the last light of evening threads through the edges of clouds. The pup's shivering eased by degrees. He blinked, once, twice. He breathed. He lived. I stood rooted, useless and full. I had seen human families do this around hospital beds and kitchen floors and roadside ditches. The gathering, the wordless assignment of roles, the blessing passed from one pair of hands to another. I had never seen it in fur until now. My chest ached with the recognition. I kept thinking, this is what we do. This is what they do. There was no difference that mattered. The young wolf, the one who had wanted so badly to throw himself into teeth, leaned forward, so slowly you could count the seconds, and touched his nose to the pup's foot. He held it there for a heartbeat, and then drew back, eyes wide, as if he had been shocked by the holiness of the contact. The she-wolf watched him with a gaze that softened and steadied him both. He lay his head on his paws and looked at the hazel as if the bush itself were sacred. The big male stepped closer again, and this time pressed his muzzle to the pup's flank with a little more weight, and then lifted it, breathing out in a long, quiet rush. If breath can be a vow, that breath was one. The others leaned in a fraction, and the crescent pressed closer, making warmth. A gray behind me turned his head and looked at me. Just a glance, a check, an acknowledgement that I was still part of the world and not a threat to the room they had made. I lowered my eyes. It felt right to treat it like a ceremony I had stumbled into. Gratitude, I thought, and the word felt too small. Joy, I thought, and that was too bright. Protection, I thought, and that was too plain. It was all three braided. It was a feeling that made my throat tight and my eyes wet again. Not with shock this time, but with the simple, unbearable sight of love doing its work where I had been taught only instinct lived. They looked at him like he was their child, and in that moment, I understood. Animals love the way we do. The she-wolf finished her careful cleaning and slipped down onto her belly beside the pup, pressing her flank against the hazel so that her warmth bled into his small body through leaves and air. The pup shifted, found a spot between her forelegs, and let his head drop on her wrist. The humming passed through them both. The big male lay opposite, his paws outstretched, his chest in line with hers, a door on one side and another. The pack closed the circle without shutting it, the way people leave a seat open at a table for the one you're still waiting for. I could not speak. If I had tried, the sound would have broken something delicate and bright that had just formed between the trees. I watched until my eyes stung and then kept watching, greedy for every small proof that what I had witnessed was not a trick of panic or pity. The pup's breath slowed to a steady count. The she-wolf's blink turned drowsy. The big male's ears stayed sharp, the last watch before peace. My heartbeat settled. The knife on my belt hung forgotten, a relic from a story I no longer believed in. I stood there as the light shifted and the forest became itself again, green, quiet, unafraid. I knew, with a knowledge that felt like a new bone growing under skin, that I would never see them as just animals again. I had been allowed into a room where love had a shape and a smell and a sound, and I would carry it like a lantern through the rest of my winters. I stayed long after the sounds of the bear were gone, long after the pack had settled into their quiet room around the pup. The air felt different, like a church after everyone leaves, still charged, still full. I didn't want to move because moving felt like breaking something that didn't belong to me. When I finally took a step, the wolves did not look up. They didn't need to. I was no part of their problem anymore, and that, somehow, made me feel trusted and ashamed at the same time. I walked backward first, the way you leave a bedside. Then I turned and pushed through the ferns and young pines until the ring of spruce swallowed the clearing. The forest took me in like it always had, but I was not the same thing it had taken in this morning. The path I'd wandered without thinking now felt like a narrow bridge laid over something deep and bright that I hadn't seen before. My breath came strange, shallow and fast, the kind of breath you get after running even though I had not run. My heart kept punching my ribs. I put a palm flat against my chest as if to hold it in place. "This can't have been real," I said. Maybe I only thought it. The words went round and round like a trapped bird, beating at my skull. This can't have been real. It was too much, too clean, too exact. I have lived long enough to know life is messy. But what I had seen was not mess. It was precision with a soul. I stopped where the path bent and leaned a shoulder against a birch. The bark flaked under my shirt, cool and dry. I tried to sort the pieces the way I used to sort tracks in snow. There was a beginning, the cry like a puppy's, then an answer, a lone bear with eyes like hot nails, then a gathering, gray bodies pouring from the shade one by one, and then the part that doesn't fit the stories we tell when we want to fear things we don't understand, the silence that made a plan, the patience that sharpened anger into something useful, the risking of bodies to buy seconds, the mother's face when she pushed the pup, the blessing laid like a hand. How could that be true? I asked the trees. They didn't answer. They never do. But they held me up the way they hold up the sky, and for once that felt like enough. I tried to put the old words back on what I had seen: instinct, hunger, drive, dominance. The words slid off like rain off oil. They were not wrong words, just small ones. What I had watched was larger. It had room inside it for those words, and for others we keep for ourselves: mercy, duty, courage, love. I had always liked to think we were the only ones who could braid those into a rope and pull someone back from an edge with it. Today, I watched a family of wolves do it better than most people I know. I remembered the she-wolf's eyes and felt my own sting again. That look had gone through me clean. There was no plea in it, no bargaining. There was the bright, hot steadiness of a creature who had put down her body as a wall and would not pick it up again until the danger was past. That kind of clarity burns away a lot of nonsense. It burned something out of me. Maybe it was an old idea I had been carrying like a coin in my pocket and touching for comfort, that we are above the rest of life, that our love is special because it is ours. That coin felt fake now. I didn't want it anymore. I started walking again. The rhythm of my boots on the soft earth steadied me. A jay shrieked twice and then quieted, the way gossip dies when a truth walks into the room. Light shifted between the branches as the afternoon turned. I caught myself listening for the pack, but the forest had already folded their noise back into itself. If not for the torn dirt where the bear had slipped, and the faint scuff where the she-wolf had pushed the pup through leaves, you could pretend none of it had happened. I couldn't. The picture kept flashing in my head. The big male holding the bear's mind like a hook holds a fish. The youngster learning, not leaping. The flanker's quick, brave bite. The blessing of a muzzle across small shoulders. I heard the humming again, low and bone deep. I think some part of me will hear it in rooms where there are no wolves, when the people I love gather close around someone hurt and make a warm space where healing can begin. I thought about fairness. We dress that word up and put it on signs. We fight over it. Out there, fairness had not been an argument. It had been a duty shared, a cost divided, a result earned. The bear was bigger. He had hunger for a reason. The pack had a pup and a bond older than snow. None of that was fair. All of it was true. And still, they found a way to send the bigger thing back into the trees without paying with a body they could not spare. If that isn't wisdom, I don't know what qualifies. I kept hearing my own voice in my head, the voice I used in younger years when I wanted to sound sure. It said, "They're just animals." It said, "They don't think, they react." It said, "Nature is red in tooth and claw, and that's the song." Today I heard a harmony under that song, low and steady and human to the bone. It wasn't our property. We just have words for it. They have the thing itself. I reached the old cedar where the path widens and stops pretending it isn't a road. The pail on my belt bumped my hip. Berries. I had come for berries. I laughed once, short and raw. I hadn't picked a single one. I didn't care. I felt full. I felt emptied out. I felt there's no tidy word for it. Open, maybe. Open the way you are after someone forgives you when you don't deserve it. I looked back once, though there was nothing to see but the green wall. "That doesn't happen," I whispered. "Things like that don't happen." The words were ash as soon as they left my mouth. I shook my head and tried again, softer, to the only audience that mattered, myself. Things like that don't happen, but I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. I stood there, a man near 60 with a useless knife and a heart thudding so hard it hurt to breathe, and I let the admission settle over me like rain. I can't prove it. I don't need to. The forest doesn't stamp your hand on the way out. I started home. Every few steps I stopped, thinking I heard a branch crack or a soft footfall, as if the pack were walking me to the edge of their country, the way they had walked the bear out of it. It was just wind, or it was them, and I wasn't meant to know. Either way, the feeling went with me, the sense of being seen and permitted, the sense of being measured and not found wanting this time. When I reached the clearing near my truck, the light was lower, and the world had gone golden in that way it does just before evening takes over. I sat on the step and let my hands hang between my knees. I didn't start the engine. I didn't want the noise yet. I wanted the humming. "The pack showed me that nature is wiser than we are," I said, plain as a prayer. And I still can't believe it happened right in front of me. Saying it didn't make it smaller. It made me lighter, as if I'd put down a pack I didn't realize I was carrying. On the drive back, I passed the places where I've made so many small, ordinary memories, fence posts, a ditch that always floods, the bend where the sun hits your eyes wrong if you come too late. Every piece of it looked the same. Every piece of me didn't. I don't know what I'll do with that. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I think I'll talk less when people argue about what animals are and aren't. I think I'll say, "I once watched a family solve a problem together," and leave it at that. If they don't believe me, I won't mind. There was a time I wouldn't have believed me either. Tonight, When the house is quiet and the noise of the road is gone, I'll sit with the window open and listen. If a dog barks or a coyote lifts a thin song somewhere, I'll hear more than sound. I'll hear the rope of voices that pulled a small life back into the world and made room for it to keep breathing. I'll hear a blessing laid across tiny shoulders. I'll hear my own old heart learning a new rhythm. Such things don't happen, but they do. I saw it. I saw it myself. If your heart is full of awe right now, write, "Nature is wiser than us."